Let's look at slide 14. Slide 14 is a very famous slide. It's the work of a man called Hertzberg. And Hertzberg did a study 40 years ago. And he said, let us assume that satisfaction and productivity are in some way related. That happy people will be more productive people, and that productive people will be better for the organization. So satisfaction is an important thing. Now, what leads to satisfaction? Lots of things lead to satisfaction. Having a nice boss leads to satisfaction. Having a nice office leads to satisfaction. Being well paid leads to satisfaction. So he got a long list of these factors that lead to satisfaction. And he interviewed people about the list. And he came up with a rather interesting idea. He said, look, we used to think that satisfaction was a scale, highly satisfied, highly dissatisfied. And you moved along the scale. And the argument goes this: when you come into an organization, and you start in the organization, when you begin, you are not happy or unhappy. You're in between. The question is, what makes you go this way, or what makes you go that way? This is happy, sorry, this is unhappy, this is happy. What makes a person become happier, more satisfied? What makes a person become dissatisfied? And he found, and this is where it's interesting, that some factors made you slide into unhappiness. He called them hygiene factors. In other words, if you didn't have a very nice boss, if you didn't have good quality of life, if you didn't have good company policies, then you became quite dissatisfied. If all those were okay, you didn't become satisfied. You simply stopped being unsatisfied. They prevented you from sliding down this way. But other factors made you go satisfied. So he divided these into two groups of factors. One stopped dissatisfaction, and the other increased satisfaction. Different factors. Two-factor theory. Now, where is money? Money is on this side. Money is a factor which stops you being dissatisfied. Money is something which prevents you from becoming increasingly dissatisfied. It doesn't do the opposite. It doesn't lead you forward. It stops leading you back. That's an important point. It's the point, the same point. Money as a mechanism to increase dissatisfaction, not satisfaction. Now, let's deal with one of the most important issues in this whole area. It's called motivation. And there are lots of interesting theories about motivation. But I want to make one important distinction. And the distinction is on slide 15. It is the distinction between intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. Let me explain this by telling a story. It is a true story. It is a story of a friend of mine who lives very near me in North London. He has a lovely house. He is a professor. He has a study, a beautiful study with all his books and computer. And the study is next to a park, a public park, where in the summertime children play. And they make a lot of noise and they disturb him. Here is the situation. He would like to work in his study. Outside his study, children are making a noise. Ideally, he would like the children to go away. Many solutions. He could wear earplugs. He could bring in double glazing, extra windows. He could work in another room. He doesn't want to do any of those. He could get a big dog and scare the children. He could play music to annoy the children. He could pay the children to go away. That is the method of the mafia. If you pay children to go away, they come back for more money, for more money, for more money, protection money, silence money. But he was a very unusual professor. He went into the park and said, children, I like you being here. You know what? I am going to pay you to play. I'm going to pay you to play in the park. Unusual. They played in the park. The next day, he said, here is your play money. Unusual. They took the money. Third day, again, here is your play money. On the fourth day, he went into the park and said, children, I can't pay you today. I haven't got any money. Well, they said, if you're not going to pay me to play, I'm going. I'm not going to play here for no money. I'm here to play for money. What you have done is you have made something intrinsically motivated to extrinsically motivated. Intrinsic means you do it for the love of the activity. My wife sings in a choir. It's an amateur choir. Amateur comes from the word amoa massamat in Latin, to love. She loves singing. You don't have to pay people to sing because they love singing. In fact, if you pay them to do something they like doing, they do it with less happiness. That is a very important and insightful issue. How much is the activity joyful in and of itself? Do you have to pay people large sums of money for things they like doing? No. In fact, it might demotivate them. It has been shown that giving creative people money to be creative makes them less creative. Should you pay your children to do well at school? Should you? Will it affect their schooling over time? And the answer is, yes, it would. They think they're at school for money. Take away the money, take away their liking of learning. You change the relationship between what people do by introducing money. There are some activities which are joyful, which are intrinsically satisfying, where you don't reward people with the money, that the activity is reward of itself. But there are some activities which are boring and horrible and frightening. Cleaning the streets. Nobody enjoys cleaning the streets. You have to pay them. It's not very skillful. You don't have to pay them a lot. You pay people more, and you pay them more often according to the skill involved. But can you change attitudes if they are doing something they enjoy and they pay them? Let me give you an example. People will say to me, you talk nonsense about this. How can you get people to do anything without paying them? And I say, what about voluntary workers? What about people in the voluntary sector? How do you manage people who don't get paid? How do you manage people who are volunteers? You manage them by good management. You manage them by being warm and supportive and caring. And you manage them by being a good leader. That is enough. You manage them by making it fun. You manage them by having a good team spirit. That's what you provide them. The more you provide that, the less you have to care about the money. This is not an argument for not paying people. It's an argument about understanding where money fits into all this. So there's a debate among people about intrinsic and extrinsic. But the issue is a very important one. How joyful is the activity? I said earlier, I turned down jobs to be a professor. I could be earning 4 times my salary. Why? Because I enjoy what I do. I like teaching. I like writing. I like my students. I find that intrinsically satisfying. I like my job. I don't need the money to like it more. I'm not saying I would not like more money, but it won't have any effect on my motivation because of the nature of the job I do. So we need to make this distinction about the consequences of paying people for something they like doing might, paradoxically, make them like it less, not more. Slide 16 looks at trade-offs, and I've already mentioned this with my example before of the people who will take holidays rather than money. And you see a triangle there with cost, quality, or time. I heard a man arguing, and he said, if something is cheap and it is done very quickly, it's very low quality. If something is very high quality and it's cheap, it's going to take a long time. If something is quick and high quality, it's going to cost you a lot of money. Trade-offs. We trade these things off. Money is the price you pay for things. And some people are willing to trade things off and others not. Right. I am going to spend a little time on some incentives and incentives at work, but I want to just talk about one more aspect of the nature of work. Work is, for most people, a very important and healthy activity. People, often men in particular, are unhappy when they stop work. They do not cope well with retirement. Unemployed people, even though they get state support, are not happy. Why? Because work is socially satisfying and important. Work is healthy. Work has psychological benefits. Good work is good for everybody. Why? Well, work gives you a source of money. Yes, but it does other things as well. It gives you something to do. It gives you a structure to your time. It gives you a pattern and a rhythm. It gives you a sense of who you are. You are what you do. You are who you work for. I am Professor Furnham of the University of London. That's who I am. My job dictates who I am. My job is very important for my sense of self and my sense of worth and my self-confidence. What else does work do for me? It gives me a source of social interaction. It gives me friends. It gives me people to talk to. It gives me people I like a great deal. I have 2 colleagues, very interesting story. They're not academic colleagues, they're friends. Both of them are entrepreneurs. Both of them are slightly younger than me. Both of them have sold their businesses. Both of them are rich men. Both of them are unhappy men. One of them has been retired 3 years, one has been retired 4 years. They are bored. They are bored and lonely men. And so they have to start work again. They don't have to work, they choose to work. They choose to work for its psychological benefits. Work gives you a source of identity. It gives you a structure to time. It gives you friends. It gives you a sense of purpose. All of these are as important as the money, and after a while, more important than the money. Okay, just before I end, I want to talk about, on slide 17, incentives, how you best pay people. You could pay people for performance, you could pay for them for the task, you could give them a bonus system, you could pay them by individual or by group. And this is reasonably complicated. Let me make just 2 or 3 distinctions. First of all, should you pay people for the job they do or their performance on the job? Should you pay all bus drivers the same for driving a bus, or should you pay people for how efficiently they drive that bus? Should you pay people according to their productivity or their loyalty? Well, the trade unions believe you pay people for the job, not their productivity on the job. If you pay people for their productivity on the job, it is very important that they understand, that you understand how the performance is being measured. Let me give you an example for London. How do you measure a London bus driver's productivity? Well, you could do it by how many fares they take, but of course they cannot control that. One thing they can control is how fast they drive. And they have a schedule, and they're expected to arrive to pay attention to the schedule, which is a function of their driving and how well they drive. If you pay people according to how fast they drive fast. What do? They go through red traffic lights. They have accidents. They ignore people who are trying to stop the bus because the bus will go faster if it doesn't pick up the people. The question is, how, when you specify the performance, does it affect other things? And this becomes very problematic. If you pay people for the job, everyone in the same job gets paid the same, then they have no motivation to perform well on the job. If you pay them to how they perform on the job, they can get very competitive and they can try and cheat. This country has become very disillusioned with pay for performance because performance is difficult to measure. How do you measure me? I am a professor. I've told you this. Should you measure me by how many books I write? Well, if you do that, I'm not going to give any lectures. I'm going to write a lot of books. If you pay me for how good I am at lecturing, then I'll spend a lot of time of lecturing and not do any research. Maybe you should do both. But it becomes very interesting, this mix between paying for performance and measuring performance, or paying just for the job. I think you should pay people for performance, but be very careful about how you specify that performance and how that is measured. Some jobs it's very easy, like in sales. Some it's very difficult. It has important consequences, as does paying people individually or in teams. Most of us at work in groups. Should I be paid the average of my group, or should I be paid as an individual in my group? Do you want me to cooperate with my team members, or do you want me to compete with my team members? What are the consequences of paying me as an individual or paying me as a group? One affects cooperation and one affects competition. Often it is better to pay people team rates, not individual rates, hoping that they will make a contribution to the team. But then people in the team become very sensitive to those who don't pull their weight. These are subtle and important issues. They're issues which cause a great deal of conflict. Should you pay people for time, or should you pay them for the job? Let me give you an example from my own life. We have somebody to look after our garden in London, a gardener. If you pay gardeners for the hour, they will take 10 hours to do the job. If you pay them for the job, they will take 4 or 5 hours, much less time, but maybe they don't do it so efficiently. So you're paying them for the amount of time they spend, or some other characteristic, some other output variable. The issue with paying people at work is, how do you pay them as an individual, or do you pay them as a group? Do you pay them for time? Do you pay them for performance? Do you pay them for loyalty? Do you pay them performance? And you pay them relative to, how do you make a decision about paying them relative to other people? There's no easy answer to these questions. There are historical precedents, and we know that people's satisfaction and their cooperativeness is a function of how they are paid. It is a not easy issue to discuss abstractly, but I think one needs to look at quite carefully the consequences of the way in which you pay people. Okay, I am now going to draw this to a conclusion. The study of money in the workplace is, of course, fascinating, and the study of the psychology of money is fascinating. Money, as I've said, people aren't always rational about their money. Money for some people represents power, it represents love and so forth. They give away some types of money, they hold on to, they get very, very angry about money, they're very emotional. We are people of the head and people of the heart, and they're connected. And often the heart rules the head with regard to money. Money beliefs and practices come from the past, the way in which we are brought up. Money is only partially related to happiness. But in the workplace, it's very important. It is the way in which we best and most easily compare ourselves to other people. Paying people fairly and equitably is very important. Remember this, they will compare themselves with other people. They will cooperate or compete with other people in the way in which they are paid. Never underestimate the power of money, but equally importantly, never underestimate the power of good management. If you have good management and good leadership in an organization, money becomes much, much less important. The more intrinsic, the more satisfied people are with how they work and where they work and what they do, the less important money is to them. Therefore, as a manager, as a business leader, if you can create a happy, healthy workforce, then money problems and money issues will, to a large extent, disappear. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity of listening to me. I hope some of the things I've said both make sense and help you to become more successful in your career. Thank you.